what we're doing is like Terra Nexus is an early stage climate tech company that is actually focused on getting people to work together in food supply chains to reduce the emissions from food. And we do that by essentially creating a collaboration space and a recognition platform that helps people identify what solutions that are currently out there in the world.
Hey everyone, we're Nora and Lynn. We're the host of Empath, and welcome back to our new episode. Today, we're really happy to have Josh here as our 12th guest speaker. To give a little bit more about Josh's background, Josh is a food and agriculture executive with over 15 years of experience leading food supply chain and climate-focused organizations. He has generated over $1.5 billion of verified shareholder value and reduced over 500 million in food waste across global food supply chains. Currently, Josh is developing the food laws and waste solutions to support the implementation of proven technologies across the food value chain. He is an active advisor and board member to early stage climate startups and universities. He's also a former CRO and CSO and consulting practice leader at Deloitte, with a proven track record of developing, commercializing, and implementing digital products and services on 70 more client engagements. Josh is an MBA alumnus of the Ross School of Business at UMich, where he focused on strategy, venture capital, and finance. Josh, we're really happy to have you today.
I am super excited to talk to you. So even hearing that introduction, it makes me feel old, but excited to talk about a lot of really cool things.
Yeah, thanks for being here. Well, why not we start with your past experience at Michigan? Could you share like some of your memorable experience at UMich, and what do you think is the most valuable lesson that you learned at Michigan?
Yeah, it's a great opening question. And I feel like I think about it a lot because I feel like, when you reflect on experiences in your life, the things that are actually the most valuable change all the time. So, I think of my Michigan experience in like a couple of categories, which was like everything that I thought it would be before I got to campus, that like initial campus, what I'll call like climatization of the actual climate and the, community itself. And then, you basically have like these highs, these lows, and then the kind of things that stick with you. And so, yeah, a little bit about me. And I know both of you have now learned this, but, like I'm a Louisiana kid who found myself like very far north. So I think about that like all the time. And I really think of that part of my life is like the jump. It's easy to say like I want to go out and change the world and I want to do all these things in sustainability. And so I applied to business schools. I was working at an energy company. And then I talked myself out of going before I ever heard. So I was like, I'll never go. I don't need to go. And so I remember that first, like getting a phone call and finding out like I got in. And I was still like, well, I'm not going to go. But then I was really interested in Michigan and I got a consortium fellowship. And that community meant a lot to me. And all of a sudden, I was at this like crossroad in my life where I actually had no excuses. Like everything was like, I have to go. But it's still so scary because you have to like pack up your life and like move and you have no idea what it's going to be like. And I had great people around me who just kind of pushed me to be like, you're going to love the journey. And I think that's really true. So it's like, it's scary before you start. And then you find yourself on this journey and you don't know what it's going to be like. So that I think about being far north, like one of my first memories of Michigan is I think this is humorous, at least now to me. Like, I didn't know what an REI was. So it's like visiting an REI, buying the largest coat that I could find, and then sitting outside at like 4 o'clock in the morning with my wife and seeing snow. Like, that was like the first time I had seen snow. So it was like, it was such a new physical environment and it was so scary at the beginning. And then you're surrounded by like all of these great people. We've talked about like some of the successes. Like I love case competitions, thinking about climate change, sustainability, investing in this future. I was a part of the VCIC, venture capital investment competition team. When we won, we ended up going to Boulder, Colorado, where I currently live now. So this idea that you could do good work and end up in this like beautiful place and work on the planet is like such a high experience of what something like a Michigan community and degree does for you. And then at the same time, it's actually really hard. For the first time for most of us as classmates, like we faced adversity of not getting like every job we applied for. not getting every sale during your internship and just being like so learning that that is just comfortable. Like that's not actually failure. It's just part of a process. And having a Michigan community of people to just pick you up and say like, yeah, you're not going to win. You just have to keep going back. So being around people who understood that, I think is the conviction part of it's scary, but there are going to be people who help you. And then ultimately, as I've got to know both of you, and I think about this a lot, the capstone for me of a Michigan experience is like really Wolverine Venture Fund. That was a difference where I learned at Michigan, you can be passionate about something, you can find something interesting, but Wolverine Venture Fund was not a club. It was hard to get onto. You have to work your way on. It's a professional run fund,
Mm,
long hours. And that showed me that it's like what I was doing was developing a craft. Like I had to practice to get better at things. And so being a part of that organization it showed me a really big separating line between academic things that I learned versus how it feels different when you're investing real money, you're making real decisions. And yeah, I think about that a lot is like that experience was such a good transition from this is scary to this is fun to people will pick you up and things will be okay. But ultimately, at the end of the day, our success is based on going to work, putting hard, methodical work in, and just keep going.
yeah, that's exactly how we feel like studying in Michigan. We are surrounded by so many, supportive people and the friendly environment, and all those alumni are really helpful to us too. So I know that you were really involved in the venture capital area in Michigan, and you talk about you're working in the Wolverine Venture Fund. How does that help you with your understanding and your, transition to the clean tech and the sustainability area?
Yeah, I think it probably helped me in ways I wasn't expecting. From an expertise perspective, I had an energy background. I was working in kind of technology and finance at a large energy company. And that's what got me to, work my way onto the fund. But then you get to see deal flow. So you get to see like all of the possibilities of things you can do with your life, which is probably more of a scary thing about like, oh no, we need solutions and water and recycling and energy and food and the things just go on and on of the number of places you can go and make a difference. But I think I go back to that fun, like really helped turn me into like a true professional and understand like the dynamics of how hard it is to actually build a market, how hard it is to understand like will proven technologies be adopted and by when. And I look back at that time and I think of, Tom Kinnear, Eric Gordon, who ran the fund. They were both legends, have been doing this and just teaching you the right mindsets. Jason Townsend, Michael Godwin were running the fund when I got to Michigan. They raised a fund after leaving business school. And so getting to work with them and seeing the same sort of like dedication, understanding of risk and the true sort of dynamics that change, like do people adopt technologies and will those technologies truly create an impact? I think that changed my mindset from, hey, the world needs climate solutions to the world needs markets, adoption, all these other things for climate solutions to be successful. And yeah, having that opportunity in those safe spaces, they did a lot for me at I think, a pivotal part of my career in setting
Yeah.
like a foundation for what it means to be successful in those industries.
Mm-hmm. You joined several companies at your early career stage, like Chevron and General Informatics. Can you share a little bit more, like your experience there, and like what did you learn? How does that differ from, your past experience?
Yeah, so I worked for General Informatics and Chevron before I went to Michigan. And for me, one of those is a household name, and one of those should be a household name, but is not. And so General Informatics was an innovation startup that I worked at. It was based on LSU's campus. I'm an LSU undergrad, as an amazing founder, a guy that since has won so many great awards and accolades for essentially dreaming up creative solutions and then putting them into place in a world of like small business solutions. That's what General Informatics did. I was basically employee number 3. So I had a lot of responsibility, but a lot of accountability. So, you can talk about all the things that you want to do that could be done, but like dream them up, put them in place, and see if you can add real value for small and medium-sized businesses. I got to do that, every day. And, after a year of working there, we won the Microsoft Small Business of the Year. We got to go to Hawaii. Microsoft paid for it. It's absolutely great. Thank you, Microsoft. We got like 15 seats or something, but there was only like 3 of us. So we ended up bringing like most of our customers. And I think of this as like my undergrad degree would essentially be, as a data scientist, I take data and information and technology and help people change the way they do business. And, general informatics is like the foundation of my career. And, Mo, who ran that company, helped push me out the door as well to go work for Chevron, which was a similar topic. And Chevron was in 182 countries. So it was like, could I go and dream up solutions and then put them in at scale, on a global perspective? And it was always like, if not, it didn't matter. I could always go back to general informatics and we could change the world one small business at a time. Chevron was such a great place to work. I loved working there. California energy company. It actually made it hard to go to Ross because, they would have paid for my business school degree if I stayed there, if I had gone somewhere else. But ultimately, I saw myself wanting to go out and change the world. And I think energy companies at the time were really future-proofing themselves. Even back to like 2006 or 2007, working on a crude trade desk, everyone was talking about sustainable aviation fuel. I love to bring up that example because I went to Michigan thinking like I had missed it. Like the sustainability revolution's already here. Like people are solving climate. I missed it. And that's like 2006, 2007. 2005 word of the year is carbon neutral. Rolling Stones went on tour in 2003 or 2004 on carbon offsets. And so a lot of the things we talk about today were actually really big then. And a big part of why I took that innovation and changed the way of business and said, I want to go to Michigan. I want to learn to do that, in renewable energy, decarbonization, electric vehicles, all the things. And that is why Michigan was such a great fit for me.
Yeah, I know you also work in Deloitte for more than 9 years, and you published so many research reports, and it's also shown on your LinkedIn profile. I read some of that, and you dive really deep into like sustainability, food, agriculture, different those areas. How was your experience there? And like, could you share some of the key takeaways you learned from working in the consulting firm for that long?
Yeah. Yeah. 10 years at Deloitte, absolutely amazing place to work. I joined Deloitte, in one of those waves where it had just acquired multiple sustainability consulting firms. So I got to work with, you know, true industry legends who had been doing sustainability work for like 20 years already. I've probably set up sustainability organizations in probably about 30 Fortune 500 companies. And at that time, that was a huge trend of like setting up sustainability organizations, figure out what's important for corporations. And that was really fun because it's very similar to that VC deal flow. I got to see all of the issues that are impacting corporations and like how they could make a difference. And like every person who joined a consulting firm, like the plan was like survive for 2 years and then find a real job. And, I just got lucky to have a string of amazing sets of projects for a decade and I couldn't leave. So it was really cool. I think of the pivotal moment for me at Deloitte is like as an energy guy working in decarbonization, I actually found food because I was doing a project where we're making power from food, all the food that was going bad in grocery stores. And it got all this press and it was like this cool futuristic idea. And at the end of that project, we're just scratching our heads and thinking, hey, this client has 6, maybe $7 billion of food that gets thrown in the trash like every year. Like I'm glad we turned it into 10 or $50 million of energy, but it really feels like there's so much more that we can be doing in food. And because we had the analytics, we was at a time where we had IoT sensors and we were starting to play with blockchain and all of these technologies, we started just diving into how can we go after food waste as a solution. And so that was really fun for a long period of time. And, all the way up until essentially COVID, where we started to see like major changes in food systems. And that's about the time I decided that I had been there enough that I could run a sustainability organization. And that was kind of like the second part of my career to like go and own those decisions. But absolutely amazing getting to work across so many technologies
Mhm.
and have the ability not to just say this is a good idea, but to put in solutions that work, that you can show a business case and continue to do that at a company, just a lot of impact. And I think there's a huge place for consulting firms still in the space.
That's amazing. So one thing we observed recently is a lot more and more students, they're actually dedicated to go to those like sustainability focused consulting to gain those sustainability exposure, just like you. So we actually want to move for the next part about more about your current experience and your startups. So we are curious, like what kind of challenges and difficulties you witness in current sustainability subsector, and how does that motivate you to start your startup?
Yeah, I think about this a lot, in sort of like broader sustainability and then like food and ag, where I play. And, it is the reason I oftentimes will go back to like working in an energy company or talking about so many of these solutions, they've been around for so long and they feel new to people. And that creates, its own challenge when we think like, hey, well, renewable energy or this food waste thing is like brand new when it isn't brand new, but we approach it like it's an early adoption of technology. So I really struggled with that working in any single company on like how do we get adoption to speed up. And that's why, that background in venture capital and thinking about what can we do today as 20 years has gone by, or recently this week I was talking to old mentors who've been in the space for 40 years or 50 years, and we're still struggling with the adoption of that technology. So that is super top of mind on why I go out and try to do my own thing. I think in food and ag has the combination of like opportunities and challenges where you have similar structure that we see other places. So we have like aging infrastructure and labor shortages. We have market dynamics where we have uncertainty or we have like real volatility in markets. And then we have this like lack of trust because of just the historical nature between the way these supply chains and markets have been run. And you're like, these challenges also like great opportunities for people who are passionate about it. When you have infrastructure the same way as it was 100 years ago, we have digitization, we can enhance the way that people work together. For market dynamics, like all of the volatility and uncertainty, we can help with planning. We can be very purposeful about the next food system that we want to build. And trust is like we can actually figure out how to reward people who work together. These food systems, like they have been engineered this way. Like we spent most of our technology as humans figuring out how to move different types of foods further and further away. And that's created its own set of challenges that are actually relatively new. So we've got this great opportunity to use technology to essentially innovate our way forward into a different type of food system. Or if that doesn't work, at least innovate our way backwards toward a food system that at least is correctly like right sized for where it sits. So those are the things I see in sustainability and food. And I know you asked a little bit more about like what I'm doing or what we're doing is like Terra Nexus is an early stage climate tech company that is actually focused on getting people to work together in food supply chains to reduce the emissions from food. And we do that by essentially creating a collaboration space and a recognition platform that helps people identify what solutions that are currently out there in the world. We could talk more about some of those if you want, and what the value would be if people put them in, because we know after 50 years of watching people do pilots what it should be worth. And then we go and do the measurement of before and after to look at the impact of food that's been reduced and the emissions associated with that. And I have a great co-founder who works on the carbon market side to get the right value for that and pay people to not throw food away, which should not be such a novel concept. But when we think about just a little bit more, I'll give you on food waste because I can go forever, but it's a problem that keeps getting worse. It's over $440 billion. 40% of our food gets thrown away. That's 20% of the water in the US goes to food that never gets eaten. It's 10% of the emissions. If it was its own country, it would be the third largest emitter. It just gets worse and worse. And we've known this about food waste for a long time. And every year we're throwing away more food. And every year we actually have more solutions for food waste. So we sit at this precipice where we have more food waste than's ever existed, but we have more solutions to food waste that's ever existed. And the reason Terra Nexus exists is we want to help people start putting in those solutions that do exist in the right places so we can change the trend that we see in food waste and ultimately have food nourishing people instead of sitting in garbage cans and then ultimately landfills.
I know you mentioned a little bit, but do you want to elaborate more about your innovative technology in Terra Nexus you're adopting right now?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. It's like I'll separate what we do from these solutions, which in my mind are the true innovation. I mean, we'll see as history goes by what, who gets credit for what, but there are technologies that exist today. There are things like shelf life extension, at Terra Nexus, think about our friends at some place like Verdant, where they use technology to help food actually last longer. And when food lasts longer, we reduce some of that variability in the market. It is thrown away a lot less often, but in something like a shelf life extension, it often has to be paid for by a farmer. And then the benefit comes to us as a consumer, like something like a peach will last longer at our house. The benefit might go to somebody like Walmart who sells that peach. And so the challenge becomes, if you are a large peach farmer, how do you figure out, is it worth it for you to put Verdant onto your peaches if somebody will not pay for that? Like, will you get an investment? We know the food system gets a large investment there. And so we take what we do at Terra Nexus is we actually build that business case first. We qualify, we'd say like, yep, Verdant counts for the carbon markets. Here's the impact it's going to make. So make it easy for a farmer to choose the type of technology to put in. We use our own analytics and digital tools to measure how much food waste they currently have today and how much should be across the system. And then we go after they implement a solution like this and we measure it again. So we see like, yep, maybe Verdant told you you'd see a 40% reduction in peaches food waste. Actually, we saw a 43% reduction. And here's how many carbon credits it should be worth. So that's like a simple, we're big fans of shelf life extension. We think it's undervalued. We think there should be a place for that. But there are other things that we definitely like and that we're looking at putting in at both a farm level and at a midstream level. These can be like secondary market. You can think like ugly produce, but other technologies help identify product before it's going to go bad. Things like other friends, like spoiler alert, love what they do in finding product that is going to go bad and actually finding another home for it. The misfit markets of the world, the Barnanas who get to upcycle and sell that, then we're actually feeding humans. So where we sit in Terra Nexus is to get people to understand that there is value today. There's an equilibrium in a market that's not optimized. And when two people come together, we can actually find another home for that food. There's actually more money to be made. It easily pays for the cost of the solution. It gives a new life to food, and then it feeds humans at this really high value. And then, oh, by the way, there's all these emissions that don't happen. So we want to be the collaboration space and then the recognition platform for these solutions. And if people are interested in solutions to food waste, Refed, the nonprofit, does a great job. There's over 1,500 solutions that are sitting out there. Our goal is to make, finding the right solution to put in first, where we get people to collaborate. And then what we've seen in the past in big organizations is, yeah, you kind of get addicted to, it costs a lot of money to throw food away. Like a grocery industry throws twice the amount of profits away than they make. So you put in things that work and you make more money, then you want to do the next thing. And that's really how we start chipping away at the climate problem with food as a solution. So yeah, Terra Nexus, I know it's a lot on us, but we are digital analytics tools, a collaboration space, essentially a smart contract that connects people and then verifies that measurement. So we end up looking like a carbon asset company that pays people who reduce emissions.
Yeah, it sounds like you're actually doing something that's very meaningful. And I think that's the meaning for doing sustainability and impact investing for those investors. So we're also curious how your previous practice in sustainability sector help you to start these startups. I know there are a lot of transferable skills, but do you want to tell us several key skills you think are very important?
Yeah, I would love to try. I think that my background does one amazing thing, which is if I hadn't seen all of these solutions or had the ability to put them in place and work with other entrepreneurs, we joke about this a lot at Terra Nexus, we would probably be a trash can company with computer vision and blockchain and say like, this is the solution to food waste. And we would be facing the same challenges that the other trash can companies and the computer vision companies are still facing, which is about adoption. So when I think about transferable skills, there are a couple. One, narratives and storytelling are a really important part of this space. It's an important part of why we continue to do the things that we do or why we think we do in food systems. So understanding those stories and like how to bring the emotional element of this to people just to get them to try the change management of starting. The next is back to my time at Wolverine Venture Fund, very data heavy on what this should actually look like. The idea of not throwing food away is quite simple. Like if the solution to food waste was to not throw food away, then we would have fixed this problem. So really being able to dig into data and understanding the true root causes and then be able to turn that into a solution that oftentimes doesn't look as sexy as we think it's going to look. And it goes back to then you roll your sleeves up and you put it in and you take a lot of work. And I remember at Deloitte, we had a client, we did a lot of that, $1 billion worth of value in food waste. It was 5 years. I mean, it's 5 years of setting up a new supply chain, the technologies. It's not a simple quick fix, but that kind of perseverance, data-driven storytelling is the difference between, I think for me, has been a big part of my career. And that's the difference between, like textbook strategy and yeah, if you believe it so much, then go out and do it because no one else is going to do it. And probably why I ultimately end up, in my own startup in a place where we think we can make the most impact.
I think those advice will be very useful to our audience. And we're also curious, according to your observation, what other opportunities you find in impact and sustainability, like startup areas? Do you want to share some of your thoughts?
I think there's so many, it's just like food waste. You can just amplify that in every sort of industry. There are so many ways to make a difference. One, you can drive yourself crazy on picking the best one. I have yet to find, and anyone, please feel free to email me if you find easy solutions that just make like massive changes that people could just put in. So there's very few like new ideas that have not been in this industry for like 20 or 30 years. So I think there's such a huge opportunity for people who are purpose driven and really work from an authenticity perspective of they know why they want to make something happen, then the opportunity is just massive. But that mindset comes into, how those industries have evolved. And I just think that there is so much opportunity to come in and say, like, we understand how things are, but we have a certain amount of time and we're going to pick solutions and we're going to start putting them in. And I think if you have that mindset, then it's really about what you're most interested in. You can make a huge change in electric vehicles and transportation, food systems. Didn't mention, even as a company, our name is Terra Nexus. The nexus is important. We talk about the water, energy, and food nexus all the time. My career has essentially followed that. So it takes energy to get water out of the ground. You need water to make energy. You need both of those things to make food. We need those kind of things to feed people. So the number of places you can make a difference they're just so massive. And I would say one of the things you're starting to see in the news right now, which is a really good trend, is it's not all just tech and software. There is, real infrastructure plays, there's hard tech plays for engineers, there are ways to finance. I think there are so many different ways that you can push the envelope, and essentially any place that you have a functional skill set that you're interested in and a place in the world you just want to dedicate to making a difference, that place exists. Then all you have to do is go out and do it.
I'm also curious that, you have been working in clean tech and sustainability and also consulting related to this for more than a decade before you start your own company. And do you think that it's possible for someone without those previous working experience in those big tech or big firms to start their own company directly in food or sustainability area?
Yeah, absolutely. Probably getting closer to 20 years for me. Like next year will probably be like 20 years in this space. I think There's two things you should know about that question, which I think are really interesting. One, I think it's easier than ever to start your own company. Also, a little jab at the VC industry, which I've talked so much that I love about at the beginning of this podcast, but it's also easier to raise money as a person who has never been in an industry. The stats just show that like young entrepreneurs who are like, why do we have so much food waste? I'll just create a trash can. And that is the easy business to get funded on. So in a good way, if you want to go out and start your own business, never an easier time to do it. It's also never an easier time to get funding, even if you don't know anything. The challenges are how you walk the line of, is that really a helpful thing? Like, is that why you want to start a company to solve food waste? If so, a lot of that becomes, do you have the right people around you? You have
Mm,
the right mindset to learn from a community that is like, this is a great industry to work in. People will give you things and put you in the right places if you do work the right way and you're really dedicated to a mission. There will be so many supporters, but there are so many people who decide they will start a business in this industry because they think it's a trend right now and that's a quick way to make a lot of money. And some of those people are successful, but very few end up being successful for the long haul because it's a small community and you run into, hey, people have been doing this for 40 years. And if you don't understand the dynamics here, you build solutions that are not actually helpful for farmers, don't actually fix problems in the supply chain. Like all of these things become really hard for young entrepreneurs. I have a younger co-founder and, together, I think we form like a very good team in the way that we do this. So I know that's a very long answer, but I would say like, yes, if your path is entrepreneurship, I always thought mine would be. It took me a long time to get here because it took me a long time to find a co-founder and to make that same kind of jump I did, like going to Michigan. And I think there are people who are ready for that jump earlier in their life. And then the most important thing for them is like good mentorship, role models, and advocates. And Terra Nexus recently came through like an Antler startup accelerator, and we were around some climate companies working, one in particular working on plastic, very young entrepreneurs. And yeah, at Terra Nexus, we do everything to support them, not because they're young entrepreneurs, because of the way that they go about what they're doing in plastic. It's very easy to advocate for young entrepreneurs doing things for the right reasons. And it's really easy to just kind of ignore the noise of people who think they have a solution that isn't going to work. So that's the challenge of being a young entrepreneur is how do
yeah.
you fight through the noise and how do you find champions who put you in the right place to be successful?
Yeah, I think you also brought a really good point that having those experiences actually helps you to figure out the real problem and are you solving a problem that people are struggling with it. So that's really great advice. And I think the last part, we actually wanted to seek some of your advice for the young students or young professionals. You already talked a little bit about mentorship, and obviously you have a good mentors and we wonder how does the mentorship play the role in your career and how could young students or people find good mentorships?
Yeah, I mean, a great question. Unlike my career path, I feel like, the mentors in my life have come more at random. So like I don't think I did a good job of, picking Kyle Tanger at Deloitte as a mentor. I think I happened to be at Deloitte and Kyle, CEO of Clear Carbon, was acquired by Deloitte. But I would say, or I would guess that he would say that, the way I've gotten all of my mentors is doing really good hard work
Mm,
for people. And I think that people in this space notice other people. So like that is the foundational element of getting people to support you. Without the mentorship that I have gotten, I definitely see like that I would have like way more struggles. And then yeah, I think I have two messages for the both audiences. One is like I used to mentor a lot more people and I generally don't anymore. I have become a big fan of advocacy. I think you need advocates. It's mentorship is great. And for all the people out there saying they mentor 10 people, it's like the world needs advocates right now, saying like these people will make a difference. I vouch for that. I put them into these safe spaces. I think that's really important. And then I think from a trust perspective, that means that when you're looking for mentors or advocates, like you have to be willing to ask, much like a sales process, not just, hey, will you be a mentor, but hey, what do I need to do to prove that what we're doing is important enough that you would, make a call to this person on my behalf? Because that really ends up being the kind of people who meet you and say, like, I'm going to get you a meeting with this person. And that kind of thing is the real, change in your career trajectory. And it takes some advocates. But mentor is great. Mentorship is great. You should definitely look for people to help you and learn, but really like finding people who are going to advocate for you, especially in this kind of career, I just think are just crucially important.
Mm, that's wonderful. We also wanted to know that what's your general advice for students who are graduating and joining those environment, especially you have those decades of experience working in big corporates and collaborating with different people. What are your general advice for them, and how do they better prepare for themselves?
Yeah, it's a really tough question, but it's a great question. I will do my best to hit on some, maybe even some of the points that I've said earlier. And maybe I'll flip this just to say, like, there is a lot of noise in this space. And that makes things like it's really difficult, right? My LinkedIn feed is full of generically noise. Like there's a new thing that's happening, and the only thing that I have and knowing that it's noise is, hearing it 8 or 10 times going around. And that is, I think, a really hard challenge when you go to work at a company. But it's like what you actually have to do is find a tribe of people. Like you have to find authenticity and purpose in the people that you work with more so than the company itself. And you can find those kind of people at most companies. But without those kind of peoples, it's very hard to get the mentorship that you asked about. It's very hard to find good role models in this space when oftentimes you can be a new college graduate and go to work for somebody who's doing sustainability, have only ever done it at one company, and they're 3 or 4 years in. They might have learned that from, no offense to like a lawyer or like the ESG side, but you know, it's a very different thing. And it makes it very hard because for most careers, if you were going into venture capital, if you're going into finance, like you can find somebody who knows venture capital really well and they can teach you to be a good venture capitalist. It's much easier to figure out if they were successful or not. It's much harder in this space. So with that noise and like finding good role models, that is really my advice: is look for people who are going to invest in you. Look to see what those people know at that company. And it's a very accepting community. So, reach out and find out what it's like to work at a company, what kind of difference that you can make. Because if not, the way that I still struggle,
Mm,
many sustainability professionals struggle. It's a very broad topic. I know a lot less about electric vehicles than I do about food waste. And so it's just very hard to navigate that at the beginning of your career. And so my biggest advice is, talk to people who work at those companies, see who those people are, go and talk to them and see how they feel, what their aspirations are in the space, why they got into it. And when you find people who are like you and you have that authenticity,
mm,
then there's so much you can get done from the why you're going to do this versus like what you can go and do somewhere. That has stuck with me a lot. It's like the people who I've ended up working for have made the difference, not the cool idea or the scale or anything else like that. So yeah,
mm.
great role models. Do your best to stay away from the noise in this space. Maybe I'll give you one more thing. We used to call them bumper stickers at Deloitte. So if you're looking for something that could be noise, if things sound very simple and true, then they probably don't work in the real world. Like Deloitte used to have a thing called every company was an energy company. It made sense to me because I was like, every company did use energy, or right now you'll see every job is a climate job. That also makes sense to me. And then the challenge is, okay, if every job is a climate job, then why do we have more emissions than we've ever had? So like we will eventually have to change something. So when you hear those noise and those things make sense, we have to feel like that's not a new finding. Then every job has always been a climate job. So how will we go and make a difference? Becomes a good way to cut through the noise, the same way like not throwing away food is not the solution to food waste. there are real solutions, there are real complications in this space. So I love the simplicity, I love the messaging. And there is a lot of difference we can all make. Cutting through that noise, I think, becomes really important to understand like what your day job actually looks like to, move the ball forward in any meaningful way.
Yeah, I think that's super inspiring. And we can move to the last part, our rapid fire. So we will have 3 questions and you can just answer immediately. So our first question is, which place is your favorite place at University of Michigan?
Yeah, I'll do rapid fire consulting style because it ends up in a framework. Favorite place in Michigan from a nostalgic standpoint is the Winter Garden and Ross. I feel amazing every time I'm there. It reminds me of why I love it. I'm such a food guy that from an eating perspective, Zingerman's never misses. From a drinking perspective, which is the other part of life, like Dominic's is such a special part. And then there's a real hidden gem that some people are going to be mad at me for saying is I'm a big fly fisherman, and there's a soccer field on campus that floods. And when it floods from the Huron River, there's fish that come into the soccer field. And there are people out there who fish soccer fields. And I was one of those people. And that is one of like the coolest things and experiences. Yeah, those are my 4 things for favorite place at Michigan: soccer field, Dominic's, Zingerman's, and the Winter Garden at Ross.
That's interesting. And the second one is, what's your favorite book?
Definitely hard. I probably read like 50 or 60 books a year. Probably because of this conversation, I would say from a just any book you could read. I love The Name of the Wind, fantasy, world building, like get away from stuff. And then from a food perspective, I really love Third Plate or Four Fish, depending on if you're going to be like a agricultural person or want to see why we only eat 4 fish. I love both of those from a food perspective.
And the last one is, what's your favorite podcast?
Favorite podcast: 3 types of podcasts. Anything my buddy Joel Gamron does, I love. He's got a new series out. I'll watch that. Probably not a podcast, but my favorite TV show about podcasts is Only Murders in the Building, because that show is freaking amazing. And then the last type of podcast, it's got to be this one. So it's got to be one that I'm on. So it's like, those are my 3 favorite.
Thank you. Yeah. You're also the last guest speaker for our podcast for this year. Yeah, we're really happy to have you as a mark at the end of the year.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Thank you both. We've got to meet each other a little bit in this process, and just think it's very inspirational about how you go about working and why you do this. And yeah, I just keep going. You just do such inspiring work. So super happy to join you and just get to talk about things that are fun.
Thank you. It's a great milestone for us at this time of the year. And thank you so much for joining us. It's really nice to hear all your advice and your experience and hearing talking to our audience.
Yeah, great. Well, look forward to coming on again.
Yeah, absolutely.